episode titles starting with the letter P to T. Pirate's Treasure. If you take a close look at Katsushika Hokusai's woodblock print under the wave off Kanagawa, you'll see Mount Fuji in the background. The print is actually part of a series of 36 wood blocks called 36 Views of Mount Fuji.
So do real pirates use treasure maps? No. In fact, the idea of a treasure map where X marks the spot comes from Robert Louis Stevenson's famous book, Treasure Island. Georges Bizet wrote his first symphony when he was only 17 years old. But it's his opera, Carmen, that he's most famous for. Even though Carmen was written more than 100 years ago, you can still find it being performed all over the world today.
Paul Gauguin was born in France, but he eventually moved to the Tahitian Islands, where he painted the local scenery. While there, Gauguin built a cabin called House of Joy to live in on the island of Dal-Nani.
Paul Gauguin wasn't just a master with paint and a brush. He was also a well-known woodcutter, printmaker, and potter.
Nautical whistles are actually called boatswain's pipes, and they've been used on boats for hundreds of years. The high-pitched noise they make is perfect for being heard over the sound of wind, storms, or other things going on aboard the ship. Georges Bizet took piano lessons from his parents when he was very young, and he got to be so good that he was admitted to the Paris Conservatory to study music when he was only 10 years old. We know that waves end at the beach, but where do they begin? Waves build up in the middle of the ocean, where they form because of the wind. The size of a wave depends on how long the wind blows and how much open water it has blown across.
Quincy and the Magic Instruments.
Gustave Courbet is known as one of the fathers of European Impressionism, partly because of his paintings like The Wave, painted in 1869.
The Thar Desert is sometimes called the Great Indian Desert, and it covers nearly 20,000 square miles in India and Pakistan. That's almost as big as the state of West Virginia. Hot air balloons may have been invented by human beings, but the first creatures to take flight in one in 1783 were animals, a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. That.
Russian composer Peter Tchaikovsky not only wrote the music for Swan Lake, but he composed scores to the ballets The Sleeping Beauty and The Nutcracker as well. Peter Tchaikovsky was hired to write the music for Swan Lake by Russian director Vladimir Begachev, who paid him 800 rubles, about the same value as $550 today.
The Arabian Sea is part of the Indian Ocean, and in some places it is nearly 3 miles deep. This sea is full of fish like tuna, mackerel, and sardines. That. The Thar Desert is the 7th largest desert in the world, and while the temperature can be frigid in the winter, it gets hotter than 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer.
French painter Gustave Courbet taught himself to paint by studying the paintings of the masters hanging in the Louvre and trying trying to copy their work. Ring around the planet. Saturn is one of the largest planets in the galaxy. But would you believe that it's also the lightest? That's because Saturn is mostly made up of gas. In fact, you can't stand on Saturn because there's no real surface to step on.
Composer Antonin Dvorak's Symphony No. 9 is also called the New World Symphony. Maybe that's why astronaut Neil Armstrong brought a recording of it into space for the first moon landing in 1969. Back.
Being weightless in space isn't the only thing that happens to your body when there's no gravity. Astronauts actually grow a couple of inches taller while they're in space.
The rocks floating around in space called asteroids aren't round. Most asteroids are shaped like ovals and dumbbells.
You won't find Gustav Klimt's painting, Tree of Life, hanging in any museum. That's because it's actually painted on the dining room wall of a palace in Belgium. Gold and silver isn't just for jewelry. If you look closely at the painting, Tree of Life, you'll see that Gustav Klimt used pieces of tin foil made of real gold and silver in his art.
Composer Antonin Dvorak didn't just love to write music. He was also a big fan of trains, and he spent hours and hours watching them come and go at the railroad station. Even though Saturn's rings look like they're solid circles, a closer look shows that they're really made up of big and small chunks of ice floating around the planet. Rocket Safari! Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov didn't only compose music for himself. He taught others how to do it too. One of his most famous students was Igor Stravinsky, who went on to become one of the most important composers of the 20th century.
Giraffes aren't the only ones who eat food from the branches of trees. Elephants use their trunks to grab a hold of branches and shake food loose. If they're really hungry, they'll even pull the whole tree down.
What do giraffes and camels have in common? Well, they can both get by without having water to drink every day. Giraffes are able to live off the water they find in the green leaves they eat.
When Albrecht Dürer created his work of art, Rhinoceros, he had never even seen a rhino in real life. Dürer used a rough sketch and notes from people who had seen a rhinoceros to inspire his art.
When Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov played music, he didn't just hear notes, he also saw colors. Rimsky-Korsakov had a rare condition called synesthesia, where stimulating one of the five senses, like hearing, creates a response in another sense, like sight. If you see a group of wildebeests grazing when you're on a safari, don't make any loud noises. When wildebeests get startled, they can stampede, running together in a huge group at up to 50 miles an hour.
Is the rhinoceros's horn actually a really long fingernail? Not really, but the horn is made up of the same substance, called keratin, that our hair and fingernails are made of. such a thing as a wooden rhinoceros? There is when you're talking about Albert Durer's rhinoceros. Instead of painting on canvas, Durer used a technique called woodcutting, which means he engraved the rhinoceros into a piece of wood. Living in Africa can get pretty hot for hippos, which is why they spend most of their day hanging out in the water to stay cool. But for extra protection against the sun, would you believe they put on sunscreen? It's true. The skin of a hippopotamus sweats out a natural sunscreen.
A tall totem tail.
The blue whale is the largest animal on the planet. In fact, when a blue whale is born, it weighs 50 tons. That's as heavy as 25 cars.
Many of the totem poles of the Pacific Northwest are carved by Native Americans out of giant cedar trees. The word totem means symbol, and each family is represented by a different symbol on the totem pole.
Totem poles aren't just beautiful to look at, you can read them too. The stories on totem poles are passed down from parents to their children, and they can be read like a book or a poem.
Much of the light and playful music in Johann Sebastian Bach's Orchestral Suite No. 2 in B minor was written for the transverse flute, which is the sideways flute most commonly used today.
No one knows for sure when the first totem poles were made, but many people believe it was in the 1800s. Back then, some totem poles were taller than a 4-story building.
Don't give a seal earrings for her birthday because she won't have anywhere to wear them. Most seals don't have any ears on the outside of their body. Even so, seals can still hear as well as we can when they're on land, and even better when they're underwater.
Even though most of Johann Sebastian Bach's music was written to be played in churches, his Orchestral Suite No. 2 in B minor is music to dance and celebrate to. Can polar bears be invisible? No, but their fur can be. A polar bear's fur is hollow and see-through. The fur only looks white when sunlight hits it.
Ice caves are also called glacier caves, and they're kind of like big freezers. The temperature in an ice cave is always below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Episode titles starting with the letter U to Z. Whale tail. All of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's concertos were numbered, and there are more than 500 of them. The numbers start with the letter K, followed by a number. Mozart's Horn Concerto No. 2 in E flat is numbered K417. What does a French horn and your small intestine have in common? If you were to uncoil all the tubing in a French horn, you'd have a horn that was as long as your small intestine, more than 20 feet long. If you look closely at Georges Pierre Seurat's painting, The Shore of Bas du Temps en Fleur, you'll see that the picture is actually made up of tiny little dots Seurat dabbed onto the canvas. His unique way of painting soon became known as pointillism. Back.
Georges Pierre Seurat spent his winters in Paris. where he'd work on one big painting all season long. Then, when summer came, he'd head to the beach, where he'd paint a lot of smaller paintings, like the scene he painted in the shore of Babouton en Fleur. Are pufferfish full of hot air? When puffers or blowfish blow themselves up, they're actually filling their bodies with water, not air. The Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia is so long it can be seen from outer space. Since the reef is made up of living coral, many people call it the longest living organism in the whole world.
How would we get around without our bones to support our bodies? Ask a sea anemone. They have no skeleton. While they spend most of their life attached to rocks and coral, they can slowly slide from place to place if they need to get somewhere. Back.
When Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart wrote his horn concertos, the French horn hadn't been invented yet. And since the horns in Mozart's days didn't have any valves, the only way to change the note was for the player to change the shape of his mouth.
Back.